This edition of Mac Voices is brought to you by Opsgenie by Atlassian. With Opsgenie, your next incident doesn't stand a chance. And by Mac Weldon, modern men's essentials. For 20% off your first order, visit macweldon.com and enter promo code MacVoices at checkout. Welcome to Mac Voices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, a few shows ago, we talked about the JNUC conference, the Jamf User Nation Conference with David Ginsburg. But David was an attendee, and while his observations were absolutely valid for an attendee, I was kind of anxious to talk to someone from Jamf about all of the announcements that were made at the conference and where they see mobile device management going, especially for the Mac Enterprise, because the Mac Enterprise seems to be gaining traction. I think it's probably bigger than a lot of us already suspect, and that's where Jamf comes in. So I want to welcome back Michael Devins of Jamf. We last talked to him at WWDC and AltConf in San Jose. Now I've got him here all by himself. Michael, it's great to see you.
Good to talk to you again, Chuck.
So you heard the introduction. So I want to let you run with it a little bit. You all made quite a bit of noise at JNUC, but I'll let you tell us what you think the most important things are and the most relevant for the most people.
Yeah, so the Jamf Nation User Conference is an event that we host every year. This is our 9th year now hosting the JNUC up in Minneapolis in Minnesota in October. We had great weather this year. Sometimes that's iffy, but it was a beautiful event. And every year it's continued to grow. So we now had close to 2,000 attendees this year, which we believe makes it, if not the largest, one of the largest Apple IT admin gatherings in the world. And we bring together people from all over the world talking about a variety of things. Only about half, maybe not even half of the conference is Jamf presenting. What's really unique about Jamf Nation, our community of Apple admins around the world, is they contribute significantly to this event as well. So in addition to us having, keynote starting each of the first 2 days, there were over 80 sessions, a majority of those presented by members of the community, customers, partners. And it's just a really awesome way for all of these different people from all different walks of life to come together with this common theme of embracing Apple in education, in the enterprise, and in various niche industries, and talk about those solutions, share best practices, network, and just really share in the love of what we're doing with the Apple platform.
Now, let's be real clear here about this. As you said, Mac IT, Mac administrators. So this is not a users conference kind of thing. And I was hoping to get there this year, and just circumstances did not permit it. But this is not the thing that a lot of our listeners are going to be familiar with. This is a lot higher level, and it's the presentations are geared to that specific audience.
Yeah, that's right. So primarily Jamf Pro being our longest standing and largest serving product that our customers use, organizations, IT administrators, and the associated roles in an org come together to talk about the way they use Jamf Pro, the way they use other integrations, partner integrations. We heard a lot of those stories this year at JNUC, whether it's the work we're doing alongside Microsoft or the way that IBM is deploying all these Macs and making that a real great experience. But it's about all of those pieces coming together to craft that ultimate end user experience, whether it's on a Mac or an iPad or an iPhone. At Jamf, we say our mission is to empower users with technology that puts humans first. And this is really the conference, the event where everyone can come together and share those best practices, share those success stories, share those learnings around how to create those experiences, no matter the industry. And oftentimes education borrows from commercial, and commercial is inspired by education. And so there's a great sort of melding of ideas over the course of 3 days in Minneapolis. And hopefully it's valuable for everyone, but definitely it's more geared around the people in IT or in business that are creating those deployment strategies and putting those devices in the hands of end users, not so much the end users themselves.
Okay, so before we get to some of what Jamf announced, what is the state of the Mac in the enterprise? I mean, I know you referenced IBM's deployment of some substantial number of Macs. There are a number of other substantial number of Macs out there in business. My perception is that this is one of these, it's almost an untold story right now. We hear about Macs coming in the back door. I mean, that was a big thing for a while. And then the bring your own device movement started more with iDevices, but with some laptops too. Is it a fair perception to say that the Macs are growing in importance and frequency in enterprise?
In our view, absolutely. Even iOS notwithstanding, the Mac really has established itself as a first-class citizen across enterprise and education. But when you look at businesses specifically deploying Mac, the long-standing perception is, oh well, the marketing guys and gals get the Macs because they do, the Adobe products, and other businesses may not have an appetite for it. But what we've found, partially we believe because of that halo effect of people loving a Mac at home and wanting to have that same experience at work, to say nothing of all of these students in education entering the workforce and saying, what do you mean I can't use a Mac? Really, there's an expectation that this be treated as a first-class citizen, if you will, in the corporate, laptop deployment scenario. And so it's not just about, well, bring yours if you want, or even the BYOD, the employee choice. That's really propelling into large scale orgs having a really even split on saying we're deploying as many Macs as we are PCs. We're deploying as many iPhones as we are Androids, and in many cases a lot more, to even organizations going so far as saying, we're going to rally around Apple and align our entire device strategy around Apple. So it's not about, one vendor over here for your PCs, a different for your Macs, a different for your Android, but saying we're going all in on Apple. Several organizations going all in on Jamf to power that, and saying a Mac, an iPhone, an iPad, this is how our employees are going to work. And it's the standard and the norm as compared to the exception. So the trend has definitely evolved from BYO to employee choice to some organizations standardizing altogether on Apple.
And I admit, I'm afraid I just showed my personal bias because I said Mac. And iPhone and iPad are an equally important part of the picture, as you referenced. Are you seeing the same thing with the iOS devices?
Absolutely. iPhone has a foothold in the enterprise, if you will, because it is that device of choice. So overwhelmingly, we're seeing customers, especially when users are given the choice, choosing an iPhone over a comparable handset from another vendor. But even that withstanding, iPhone and iPad give so many user benefits to the users and to the org, from ease of maintenance, ease of deployment, ease of management at scale, especially when an organization is deploying Macs, that iPhone or that iPad are a natural association. And even outside of the traditional knowledge worker example, where Michael's got an iPhone and an iPad and a Mac, we're seeing a whole new category of devices being deployed to serve specific purposes, specific functions. So you look at the iPad in the coffee shops, you look at the iPhone in the retail stores, or you look at the iPad in the hands of patients and guests, and Apple TV in every hotel room. These sort of once removed, it's not about Michael's device, but it's about the person in this room, the person that's a guest in my hotel or a patient in my hospital, or a part of their day job working with these devices. And so that whole category of not personal devices, but business devices powering these organizations, iOS is seeing huge traction there as well.
And you bring up hospitals and hotel rooms and that kind of thing. That's not usually where we think of enterprise being defined. And yet, that is becoming more and more a part of delivering the experience that the individual facility or company wants to deliver. And so it becomes a piece of equipment that is enterprise oriented, but it's also customer facing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting segment because these devices can't be deployed without the support of the enterprise, right? The devices need to be enrolled, managed, ensure they're consistent, they're on the right Wi-Fi, they've got the right applications, things that a guest in your hotel isn't going to do necessarily. So how are you creating experiences? It requires the same technical infrastructure as traditional employee devices do, but the person you're serving has a very different set of needs. So whether that's, we heard as a part of our day 2 keynote at JNUC, devices with a purpose was the theme. Red Lion Hotels putting Apple TVs in the guest room and giving them a native guest experience on Apple TV. Everything from what restaurants are around to bring up my car to the valet, powering that on an Apple TV. Or we've heard now for a few years, University of California, San Diego, Jacobs Medical Center, putting an iPad in every one of their patient rooms, 245 patient rooms. And every time a patient is discharged from the medical record system, that device is automatically wiped and reset for the next user. So they have a native iPad experience. Heaven forbid they need to stay in a hospital, and yet they can use that natively, and IT might serve up applications or content for them to use, and they're more likely to access their medical records when they're using the iPad for other things like controlling the room temperature or the lights or the TV, but also giving them the confidence that they can do whatever they want on this device because it'll get wiped at the end of their stay. Jacobs Medical Center just announced they've surpassed 30,000 device wipes since deploying these iPads. That means 30,000 patients had an iPad experience, full-fledged, FaceTime their loved ones, use apps, access their medical records. And then at the end of the stay, Jamf Pro automatically wiped that iPad for the next user so that nurses aren't doing IT tasks. It's a whole new generation of devices deployed for a purpose in whatever industry it might be. Some really compelling evolutions to that story beyond just the traditional Mac at work, iPhone at work.
Today's edition of MacVoices is brought to you by Opsgenie by Atlassian. Uptime is good, downtime is bad, and you know there are going to be incidents. That's just how it works. So how do you reduce downtime for your customers? Opsgenie by Atlassian is how. Opsgenie helps you and your team get alerts immediately when something goes wrong. But it's a huge waste of time and effort for everyone to get those alerts, especially if they happen to be on a holiday or at 3 a.m. That's why Opsgenie allows for deep flexibility in how and when alerts are deployed, with a smart combination of scheduling and escalation paths. The right people get notified at the right time, and everyone else gets their beauty sleep. But you already have all sorts of apps that do all sorts of things for you. That's why Opsgenie supports over 200 integrations with apps like Jira, Amazon CloudWatch, Datadog, New Relic, and more, so that implementing it in your workflow is simple. I told you about how I felt when a website I was trying to access was down for 30 minutes. How do you feel when that happens to you? Now, imagine how your customers feel. That's a feeling you don't want them to have, right? That's why you need to visit Opsgenie at opsgenie.com right now and sign up for a free account. No, not a trial account, a free account. Then add up to 5 members of your team, also for free, and find out what Opsgenie can do for you. Opsgenie from Atlassian. Your next incident doesn't stand a chance. Thanks to Opsgenie for supporting this edition of MacVoices. I unfortunately have had way too much experience with loved ones in the hospital, and it used to be you called in, you could get an update on their situation, and then all of a sudden we had all the privacy regulations, and so you almost had to pass a blood test to get the information. This changes that experience a whole lot. Both for the patient and I'm sure for the people around them. And the idea that you could FaceTime with somebody in the hospital instead of having to go over to wherever they are, park the car, get out, that you can make that connection. I mean, that's got to be good for everybody. And it's just a small example of the kind of thing we're talking about here, where Apple devices and therefore mobile device management improves people's lives and the quality of their experiences.
Yeah, it's so fascinating that you could improve someone's experience by making all of that downtime or all of those interstitials consumed with something productive, something distracting. Distraction therapy is a thing, right? How can we let a child in a children's hospital say, I'm between 4 and 8 years old, and we'll serve up the right applications relevant to their age range so they can use these devices, have a great experience in that regard, even if they're undergoing some really serious treatments or there for really unfortunate reasons. These devices become more than a tool. It really does impact the patient experience, and you can go out of the healthcare example into hospitality and others. Really, it's how do you make an additive experience, not just some diluted tech for the sake of tech. We really believe that this experience can only be created on Apple because of technologies like automated enrollment, so we can get the devices back under management when we wipe them, or the ability to silently install those apps at scale, create that self-service experience for the guests. So many of those pieces come together to stitch an experience outside of work that is a quality of life experience. And these devices are being deployed in those ways that we didn't even think about even just a couple of years ago.
So where does Jamf fit in all this? I mean, we've talked about now, what sort of the end result, but you all are some of the ones that make it happen. You make some of the things that we've just talked about possible. How do you fit in, and how do some of the announcements that were made at JNUC this year fit in?
Yeah, so I mean, there are a number of points of intersection, but we're really, in many ways, not the focus or highlight for that end user, but we're that critical delivery mechanism to create those experiences that IT uses. So one of the stories we heard in the Devices with a Purpose scheme was about Ohio State University and their digital flagship initiative. And they deployed 11,500 iPads to students in the couple months preceding the beginning of the school year. Every incoming freshman got one. The scale that they were able to operate on, putting those devices into the hands of students, all of the logistics of making that successful requires a lot of planning, requires a lot of integration. Jamf Pro is a key part of getting every one of those devices managed, configured, the apps deployed. And so if everything works, you don't know we're there. And that's the way we love it, right? It's about creating the experience for those users. And we're doing some interesting things beyond just the solutions we've had in market up until this point. Of course, there's a standard device management app deployment story, and we have our self-service portal that really allows the organization to create a branded experience. This is the Jacobs Medical Center self-service or whatever. But we also have the ability with some new applications we introduced this year in Jamf Setup and Jamf Reset to shift some of that decision making further down, closer to the end user, or in many cases to the end users themselves. So I mentioned earlier the notion of Children's Hospital being able to say, what age range is the child? Let's deliver age appropriate content, games that are at the right level or of the right interest for a different age range students. We're also seeing a lot of organizations that might have retail managers, but also retail associates and maybe guest experiences. These are traditionally thought of as distinct configurations, or some devices are for one purpose, some devices are for another. Nurses versus pharmacists. Really, the examples expand from there. But with Jamf Setup, we've shifted that decision of how a device should be configured from IT in some building in an MDM console to actually just-in-time configuring of that device based on the user that has it in their hands. So I can say I'm a nurse or I'm a pharmacist, and by making that selection, we'll actually configure the device appropriately for that use case. Or, I'm an 8-year-old versus a 12-year-old, and we can deliver age-appropriate content. The examples are pretty long, but these new apps in Jamf Setup and Reset really unlock this end user driven experience creation instead of device with a single purpose. And at the end of any of those examples, whether it's the iPad in the hospital or the end of a retail shift, Reset is a real simple home screen access to just say, reset this device for the next user, even if there's no system to automate against. And so that category of business purpose devices, of these industry specific solutions in hospitality, retail, healthcare, et cetera, education, Setup and Reset are really giving a new life to existing devices, because maybe they can be used in more than just one way while still giving everyone a distinct experience. And we're giving end users more direct control over their experience versus a more generic configuration that IT might need to deploy to everybody. So there's a lot of exciting things happening, but JNUC is really a great avenue to just highlight those success stories and kind of share our vision for where we think that's going in the future.
Now, in case it's not obvious, I have not used any Jamf software to implement in any kind of sophisticated environment like you're talking about, but I have played with it, and it really strikes me as so easy to use. I mean, even for your family, if you want to manage devices for your family, or if you want to take it up a couple levels and you manage devices for your extended family and friends, you can do that. I can only imagine what it must be like to have all those options but have the Jamf interface and the Jamf way of doing things overlaid on it so that I'm not quite sure I would call it fun because I probably will get emails from IT managers, but it is certainly a lot easier to do than maybe anything like this once was, and therefore makes it accessible to so many more businesses to say, hey, this is what we're going to do. A small business of 30, 50 people, maybe 10 or 20 that have distinct functions. The machines can be customized to those functions, and then if they need to be wiped, if they need to be reset, whatever, you've still got that option.
Yeah, and you talked about it a few episodes back. I don't remember how far, but talking about Jamf Now and the simplicity, even from consumers and then into the small and medium-sized business. But so many of our business customers on the Jamf Now product are in that 10 to 20 range. Like, small is small, right? They have these devices. They bought an iPad or a Mac or an iPhone for somebody because that's the device they wanted to use for work. And so many of them don't even know that MDM is a thing, that mobile device management might allow them to have some consistency, some control, some, backdoor ability to lock or erase a device. And so many of the customers we're serving on Jamf Now actually set out with an objective just to use iPads or just to use Macs. And we're actually, in a lot of ways, helping that whole category of SMB understand that we can solve some of these points of friction, to say nothing of all the people that use it at home. So we don't position Jamf Now explicitly as a consumer product, but working here, I have Jamf Now, I have Jamf Pro. I actually use Jamf Now at home, and when my kid is going to play, he's 3 years old, when he's going to go play a puzzle game, I'll put that app into single app mode so he's not doing anything else, and then I can pull it back out and let him access other things. Little examples of maybe you didn't realize that email configuration was a pain point, or that app deployment was a real budget inefficiency because those apps are just walking away when employees expense them on their own, up to the large scale of how did IBM deploy thousands of Macs a week. I mean, orders of magnitude different problems, but nonetheless, there's sort of a layer of Jamf Now or Jamf Pro for each of those scenarios. You can go huge in scale, or you can go really narrow in your deployment. But what I love is we get to solve that spectrum of problems, and really make IT the heroes, the behind the scenes heroes, and make those end users at whatever scale, small, medium, large, really have great experiences no matter which type of device, iPhone, iPad, or Mac.
I like to bring up the Jamf Now example because I think it helps people understand and relate a bit, because they may not realize it. Like the example you said with your child is perfect. You may not realize that you should, maybe are doing mobile device management, but you're sort of doing it the by hand way, and there is a better way. And if you're in a small to medium sized business, same thing. There are plenty of businesses out there that they have the individual who is interested in tech, and therefore, hey, guess what? You're our IT guy, and all of a sudden you're saddled with responsibilities that you never were hired for, never trained for, but because you're the one that wasn't afraid of the computer, you've got. And so it's important to find out about these tools, know about them, know that they're super affordable, but they're also pretty easy in the grand scheme of things to implement, and they can solve so many problems for you.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And I mean, we're on iOS 12 now, right? 12 iterations, or 8, or 7 or 8 if you count when mobile device management was really a thing on iPhone. But just taking that iPhone, iPad example for a moment, there was a time when they weren't manageable at any scale, to any degree. And every year, multiple times a year, in an ongoing basis, and that's our challenge, is keeping up with Apple, but they continue to expand these platforms. And so in some ways, we're that dog chasing the car, right? Like, we'll never get them. If we do, I don't know what we'll do, but Apple continues to push the boundary forward in terms of what kind of experiences you can create, what kinds of problems you can solve. A couple years ago, maybe you did need to sneaker net that problem, and now there's an MDM command to solve it. So it isn't even assumption that you understand it and that's a static thing. It's a constant moving of the goalpost to the benefit of IT and end users. But we've got our work cut out for us, and being able to sort of understand where these tools can help, where you don't need to walk over to that desk any longer, where you can allow more devices out because you've got the bumper lanes. You're bowling with bumpers. You do whatever you want, but just stay between the lines. You can give a lot more liberty to those users because the critical things are protected, and the rest they can create what they want on their device. So Apple's expanding of management really allows more users to deploy and IT to support it at more of a scale with less sneaker net. So yeah, it's a moving target, but it really does give what's perceived to be kind of limitless options. Hopefully most people find value to some degree with the stuff that they're doing.
And I'm very intrigued by Jamf's position in all this, that you, however you did it for whoever thought of it, what the end result is that you've taken a leadership position in this by holding the conference and by developing the programs and inviting the community in to present about things they want to present about, but also that they need to present about, that folks need to know. As opposed to just saying, okay, here's our company and here are our customers, and we'll interact through support and maybe a few other channels. You bring everybody in, and that's not, you don't throw a party. That's not it. But you throw a conference. And
we do throw a party one night. It's a good party. You'll have to come next year. You're coming next year, I think.
All right. I hope I really
not just for the party, for the whole event.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But the idea that the community gets together, and there's still in a world of virtualization, this interaction here is great, but there's still nothing like sitting down in a classroom, nudging the guy beside you and saying, "Oh, isn't that cool?" and having him nudge the guy beside him and react to something that is being presented. I love that. We sometimes lose that. And you all had the good sense to recognize that has value, and you continue to develop that. And that I congratulate you for it.
Yeah, thanks. It really is all about the community. Jamf Nation is our online community with tens and tens of thousands of active users. I don't even know the number off the top. And so these people are interacting on a day-to-day basis, post a question and get answers within minutes or hours. Like, the community rallying around this is just incredible. And what's neat is every year at the JNUC, as it's expanded from a small group of a dozen people with a single AirPod of coffee, as our old CEO used to joke, to now 2,000 attendees taking over a huge hotel convention space. Seeing people meet for the first time, or their annual meetup at JNUC, these people that maybe do only interface virtually, maybe even with their own teams, and now they get to come together and have the camaraderie of, you're an Apple admin too, to say nothing of the value that we get out of interacting with all of these customers, being able to understand where they want us to go, or what they want us to continue doing, or where they want us to be better. It's just such a wonderful human interaction, as you say, in a time where so much is just fleeting and online and message boards, et cetera. So it's a really neat, tangible manifestation of the community that exists. And even just to see that once a year, it's so inspiring, and it's so cool, and it's something we want to continue to do.
I'm happy to welcome Mack Weldon as a new sponsor of MacVoices this week, and their timing is excellent. Mack Weldon makes modern men's essentials: underwear, undershirts, and socks, as well as polo shirts, t-shirts, sweatshirts, and a whole lot more. But they're not just the kind of basics that you wear without really thinking about what you've picked. Mack Weldon takes their clothing to another level, with superior fabrics and design, so that each stitch and each seam has received a crazy amount of attention to make it as perfect as possible. What are you wearing right now? I bet it's one of the 3 or 4 brand names that everyone knows and everyone buys without really thinking about them. And I also bet that Mack Weldon is better by orders of magnitude than what you've currently selected. With smart design, premium fabrics, and simple shopping, Mack Weldon will be the most comfortable personal gear you've ever worn. For my first Mack Weldon order, I selected a variety of items, and I'll be telling you about them. But I want to start with their warm knit long sleeve t-shirt. We had some nasty weather here in the Northeast recently, so I tried out the warm knit in cold conditions and was impressed by not only its feel and its comfort, but by how warm it kept me during some required outdoor activities without the need of a bulky coat or multiple layers. This was my first piece of Mack Weldon gear, and it went in the win column very quickly. Was it my favorite? You'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, I want you to visit MacWeldon.com, take a look at all their great men's essentials, and then, when you're ready to order, use the code MacVoices at checkout to take 20% off your first order. I said that Mack Weldon's timing was excellent because the holiday season is upon us, and Mack Weldon gear makes the perfect gift, whether you order the clothing itself or stuff the stocking with digital gift cards. That's MacWeldon.com, MacWeldon.com, and take 20% off your first order with the code MacVoices at checkout. Thanks, and welcome to Mack Weldon as a sponsor of MacVoices. This one may be a little bit tough, but I'll ask it anyway. Do you see any trends in what your customers and what the enterprise is looking for mobile device management? Any themes come out of JNUC this year that you might be having to work on, or that we as consumers or we as Mac IT people of any stripe feel like we should be thinking about?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's I could answer it so many different ways, so I'll think about a couple of things. Our customers are always pushing us to be better, to do more. Some of the things that we were able to highlight this year as a part of our main stage keynotes included the advances that SAP really pushed for us to support to really create a new sort of single sign-on experience for their employees, pushing the bounds of some different pieces of technology. How can we stitch this puzzle together in a way to create a new experience? We're seeing some of the same thing with Redline putting Apple TVs in their hotels, and UCSD putting iPads in the hands of patients or care providers. So that sort of pushing the bounds of what we thought was possible with management. If only you guys could automate this thing, we could do that. If only you guys could make this delivery easier, we could give it to these people. So it's exciting that those things continue to come up almost always. I'll just say it, always born out of our customers having these ideas and us being able to sort of help in some way make that possible. The other thing that's interesting kind of goes back to this question of Apple and enterprise and Apple and education just growing to such a large scale is organizations that actually are saying, you know what, we might have Windows and we might have Android, but we're going to use Jamf to manage all of our Apple experiences, from the Mac to the iPhone and iPad and Apple TV. It's a somewhat new way of thinking about things, where IT typically operates with the computer silo, the mobile device silo, the conference room silo, the network silo. How can we bring those together? Because Apple has so many unique platform differentiating features. One of the demos we saw from SAP, they actually embed some Swift developers with their IT team. And they created, if you remember, Chuck, from WWDC, the demo Apple gave with Swift Shot, where it's sort of the augmented reality slingshot game. SAP created an app shot game forking from that code. And so you can actually slingshot to hit some app icons, and then those will launch you over into self-service to install them at the end of the game. Just the experiences, not to say that's the most efficient way to install applications, but the experiences you're able to create when you think about, what does Apple have that's unique? What experiences can I do or create to have the Apple users have the best employee experience? That might just frankly be a different set of functionality than is available on Windows or Android or otherwise. And so not thinking in terms of lowest common denominator, but thinking in terms of how can we differentiate this experience and make the most of it. We're seeing a lot of that, which is really exciting, because it's about taking full advantage of that Apple ecosystem instead of just saying we can configure email and Wi-Fi.
And I love the fact that Jamf can be used across all those devices, and that's where you continue to aspire to be able to do that. The fact that you can provide a single solution for anybody at any level, and we talked about IBM, and we've talked about the 5-person company, or maybe the 3-person family. That your technology can scale to those degrees, both up and down, and still be accessible to pretty much anybody that wants to spend a little time to learn how to do it. And then we start talking about, okay, what are you going to do next? And that's, if there's anything, that's when it gets really exciting.
Yeah, and that's when it gets really hard too, right? Because especially as we serve so many customers in education, so many customers in traditional enterprise, not to mention all of these, purpose-built solutions we've been talking about. We have finite, number of engineers and finite number of people in marketing. And how do we tell as many stories as we can? How do we create as many awesome solutions as we can? It's a great problem to have, but it's a problem nonetheless. How do you walk and chew gum and do 42 other things at once? So it really forces a discipline, but I couldn't be more grateful for that to be the problem that we're facing, which is just that we see so many opportunities and we're looking just laser focused on Apple, which honestly makes us super unique in that regard, but we've got our work cut out for us in that there are so many different ways we can continue to capitalize on that experience. So that's the hardest part, and the best part about what we do is where do we choose to play, because there are so many things we could pursue. How do we make the most of that? And that's where it just gets really exciting.
And yet, the more you do that, the more that it benefits Apple, it benefits folks like me and the viewers and listeners here, because we want more people to appreciate and understand the Apple experience, whether it's on Mac, iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, wherever. Because, yes, I admit I'm biased, but I think it's a superior experience. And I'm having some experiences with another platform right now, and I can tell you that there is some serious objective evidence that the Apple experience is superior. And I'm not going to slam anybody's product. That's all I'm going to say. And Jamf is a big part of that with what you're doing. And as we said, in the medical area, in education, in hospitality, and in every kind of other serious business, that might be a little intimidating to some folks. But Jamf is right in there pitching.
Yeah, and no technology is without its pitfalls, right? You joked previously about don't hit the format button. There are a lot of dangerous buttons that you might hit in MDM at any scale, and so part of our responsibility is not just build a tool that someone can use, but how do we provide them the right amount of support, resources, documentation, training, experiences like the JNUC to come together to learn those best practices, because the best tool in the world can't solve for a bad workflow. And sometimes the way we understand a workflow is supposed to work isn't always how our customers are trying to use that workflow. So how do we make the most of what we've got, and also understand where those happy paths are, understand how we should put some more guardrails over here, because a lot of people are falling off the track there. As the more complex software gets, the more of those challenges we find. But so it's not enough, I guess is my point. It's not enough to just say, we've got a great product, ship it. It's the support, it's the training, it's the ongoing maintenance and sort of support of the customers and achieving whatever their objective is. And so we have a huge support organization. We've got a huge enablement effort to make people successful, because the tool doesn't do that on its own. But we're pretty proud of what our tool does to help people be productive, help them find those great workflows and do it at scale. It's an area we continue to focus on as we've got customers deploying hundreds of thousands of devices. That's an order of magnitude beyond where anyone probably expected this to be even just a few years ago. So they're pushing us, we're pushing ourselves, but it's so exciting because of the capabilities and what the users are doing with them.
Well, just think about what Michael just said. Hundreds of thousands of devices. And where it really gets intriguing to me is, at one point, I was a one-device person. That was my Mac, and that was it. But now I have an iPhone, an iPad, might have two iPads, might have three iPads, might even have two phones, might have multiple Macs sneaking up behind me. So, there's that factor too, that it's not just, okay, you're a salesperson on the road and you have one device. You may be carrying multiple, and that's where it gets both exciting as far as productivity goes, but also gets complex as far as management goes. And that's why we need Jamf.
Yeah, it's no longer a straight 1-to-1 ratio. And as much as it's all Apple, iOS is different from tvOS, which is different from macOS. So when people say, oh, you only focus on Apple, not that that's a bad thing or a bad question to ask, but we're like, yeah, only insofar as it's all these distinct platform experiences. Maybe someday the watch, maybe someday we'll manage your pencil, right? It's a vast ecosystem, even if it's under that just Apple veil, because those are distinct experiences.
Yeah. Michael, please come back again and talk a little bit more about some of this stuff. I think it's fascinating. It gives a lot of us a look into a world that we only sort of glimpse. And I don't think we always realize that when we walk into that Red Lion hotel and see the Apple TV sitting there, that you don't give as much thought as you probably should to what's behind it and how is it working and why this choice was made. And I just appreciate you helping us get some of that understanding and appreciation.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
So where do we send folks to learn more if they're really interested in this or they're hearing about Jamf for the first time, which would be hard to believe, and they're interested in device management? What's the best place to send them in your website?
Yeah, Jamf.com, JAMF, silly name, Jamf.com. And then from there, we've got a number of different sections, solutions, whether that's shared device management, whether that's Jamf Now, whether that's education. But also, we just posted, I think, 30-some of the sessions from the Jamf Nation User Conference. And again, this is not Jamf necessarily telling all these stories. We record and publish all of the sessions from all of the JNUCs that we've done. So there's a vast amount of customer case study examples. If you're just curious about what people are doing, to say nothing of all of the great, marketing resources we have available, webinars, et cetera. But those JNUC sessions, the first batch of them just got posted. It's a great wealth of knowledge and something I definitely encourage people to check out.
I did not know that you were recording and posting those. There goes my weekend. Michael, thanks again. Great to see you.
Thanks, Chuck.
Folks, I'm Chuck Joyner. This is MacVoices. We will be back with more. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope you will give it a little more thought and a little more consideration. Go check out some of those JNUC sessions to get an idea of what we're talking about. I think it will open your eyes because the scale of Apple device deployment is massive, and it's fascinating to see how it happens. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our MacVoices Facebook group and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us at patreon.com/MacVoices and join these folks who help keep MacVoices coming to you. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.